When it comes to the fashion industry, it's a lens into all the things that are very much broken in our society. Inequity, human rights violations, environmental degradation. Remake was born from urgency that we needed radical disruption.
Within the fashion industry, the intersection of human rights and the environment is one of the biggest things that people don't talk about.
The environmental issues of fashion, the labor issues in fashion are a people issue. When you are picking up a piece of clothing, you need to be thinking about the people that made that piece of clothing that you are going to go and love and wear to your date or wear to school or whatever it is, because there is a hand behind every single item of clothing that you wear, and that hand is impacted by the making of that clothing.
Fashion represents this massively growing waste stream. We need so much reform. It has to be fair wages, and it has to be climate justice.
Fashion is the second most carbon-intensive industry behind fossil fuels.
We are producing and consuming at a rate that is unimaginable for our planet.
There's more and more plastics and polyester in our clothes, and what that means is that these clothes have a shelf life of forever.
The majority of your clothes are made from polyester, which is a plastic textile, which is made from oil. Polyester, nylon, spandex, those are all made from plastic, from oil, as is vegan leather, as is fake fur, as are our shoes, our sneakers.
Today we're putting billions of units out in the world. Most of those end up within a landfill within the first year of production. They're reaching into our soils, into our oceans. And the only way to make clothes so cheap is a very human price. There's a predominantly female workforce that has seen everything around her getting more expensive while her wages continue to shrink.
Today, only 2 to 3% of the retail price actually goes to the garment worker.
The important thing about fast fashion in particular is that while it's so inexpensive, there are so many people that have to be paid in order to make that piece of clothing, and the reason it's so cheap is because those people aren't being paid.
We're seeing is what you often call sort of this extraction, this sort of extractive economy.
The people who make the clothes and receive low or sometimes no wages live in the same places that are polluted by fashion's excesses.
There's a couple reasons that labor and environmental impact are connected. For starters, the people that are making our clothes and where our clothing is made is happening in environments that are being impacted by climate change. And then what's more is that if people were paid more, we probably wouldn't be having so many clothes made all the time. And so it's kind of just a vicious cycle of cheap clothes, cheap labor, more clothes, more toxic chemicals in landfills, more plastics, more microfibers everywhere.
We see, abysmally low wages and poor working conditions that's really in the service of corporate profit. To generate those profits, you have to generate mass consumerism, mass consumption.
When it comes to fast fashion, they know that they need to be pumping out new clothes all the time. For decades, they've done, 52 micro seasons a year, putting out new clothing every week, basing that on consumer behavior. Now, with advanced algorithms, these brands are able to make thousands and thousands of SKUs every single day based on what people are looking at online, what they're posting about on TikTok. With AI and all these sort of advancements, it's becoming worse than ever.
The garment industry globally is unfortunately still very much a sweatshop industry. And what that means is that it's gaining its profit through the exploitation of both people and the planet.
One of our core pillars is accountability, real corporate accountability, which comes with binding agreements, legislation, campaigning. That's the only way for us to address the fashion industry's excesses is true corporate accountability. We educate, we run campaigns, we advocate, we build transparency. But really, if you think like, what's the one thing we are all about? It is that coalition building, that radical collaboration, because these issues are so complex. There isn't one single thoughtful brand, one single thoughtful person that can do this alone.
Fast fashion is not going to change without a big collective push from consumers and the government.
We're in service of all of us coming together towards the one shared goal. Let's make sure that fashion puts people and the planet first.
Without people pushing for their governments to put in policies that will require all sorts of changing, from the amount of clothing that's made, the amount of clothing that can be wasted, how workers can be treated and paid, we won't see any change.
You know, whether it's a model, a sustainable brand, a designer, a garment worker, a union organizer, we're building this ecosystem of corporate accountability coming together.
A garment can travel up to 20,000 miles around the world before it lands on a store shelf.
Hundreds of people are gonna touch a piece of clothing before it lands in your closet. You have cotton. There is a farmer that grows that cotton on their land. That piece of cotton is gonna turn into yarn. Then that's gonna get shipped somewhere else. It's gonna be dyed. It's going to be treated with toxic chemicals. That fabric is going to go to a manufacturer. It's going to be used at a cut and sew factory, and then that cut and sew might go to another factory where they make the garment. Then that garment needs to be packed and shipped and brought to stores and brought to your home.
You know, you don't see the waste streams, you don't see the climate impacts, you don't see the polluted rivers. All you see is very cheap clothes and beautiful storefront windows. And so part of the globalization of supply chains has made it invisible for us. And so much of our work at Remake is to make that visible again, so that we recognize the enormity of the problem and can also take action.
If you don't like the system, and you have to build something outside it, or you have to transform it or change it, you cannot only rely on people who are empowered by that system. And so they have understood from the beginning, how do we build a really broad coalition, and how do we build power to make that change?
Remake's strengths include really a clarity of purpose and of message.
What Remake is doing is holding people accountable, and it's calling on people from the government to business to consumers to take responsibility for not only the social issues that are happening, but the immense waste that we're producing as consumers.
We introduce legislation. It can be at a very local level, like at a city level, at a state level, or at a federal level.
What makes Remake very special is that they have been able to connect that fashion is fun and a great way to express yourself, but you can also fight for garment workers and you can fight for the environment.
Remake is a connector. Remake has brought so many ambassadors together in community, fighting for what is a common cause.
A Remake ambassador is someone who represents everything that Remake as an organization stands for.
When you become an ambassador, you have this opportunity to inspire other people so that we can all be part of that change. At the individual level, sometimes we can think that we cannot create a change because, of course, we are just these tiny humans in this huge planet with so many people. The more voices you have, the bigger the sound is, right?
It's being a voice for those who can't speak out on what's happening and really connecting people with what fashion really is, because it's much more than just the runways, the models, the designers. It's real people with real lives who are working every day, long hours to provide for their families, and Remake just connects people to the truth of that.
A simple firing off a social media post, a simple petition, any of those things, they all add up in a collective.
This isn't just sort of, maybe one group of, disgruntled workers, but this is, really sort of coherent kind of movement for change that folks are bringing forward. And Remake does a great job of that. They're really galvanizing ethical fashion brands, sustainable fashion brands, designers, influencers to come together and bring that message. It just resonates differently with lawmakers, with stakeholders, when you have that sort of multi-sector approach, right, to policy.
That is where legislation has to come in, because if these brands are not having to report how they're making their clothing, they're not going to do it. They're going to care about how they're making money. Subcontracting helps them make money. It's an extremely complicated issue that doesn't have a linear answer, but pieces of legislation that are coming out around the world can help the way that we are seeing what brands are doing, where they're doing it, how often they're doing it.
The Pay Up campaign that Remake started really helped give voice and a platform to people oceans and time zones away. There were people who worked at factories, mostly in Asia, who were not being paid because companies in the US canceled their orders, and so then that meant that the factories didn't pay the workers.
Garment workers are still owed $5 billion.
Among garment workers that are still employed worldwide, the average take-home pay of $187 per month has now dropped to $147 per month.
On average, brands have lowered the prices paid to factories by 12% during the pandemic.
Pay Up is probably the most public big win.
All said and done, Pay Up is the most successful campaign in the fashion industry's history. We unlocked $22 billion in canceled contracts, which meant women around the world, from Sri Lanka to Cambodia to downtown LA, were paid for their work. And that really is the power of what we're building.
Remake really got a lot of us together to ask the companies and to demand of the companies to pay people and to bring the issue into popular culture. People really started thinking about, am I really buying clothes from this company that is not paying the people, mostly women, who do this work?
We have a simple slogan, wear your values. Because what we are inviting people to do is to say, well, what is your value system? Are these clothes today matching my values?
How can you, through what you're wearing and how you're presenting yourself, show your values?
The Wear Your Values campaign means figuring out what fashion means to you outside of your status and outside of how people from an external point of view see you. It aligns with what you believe in, and that's what matters the most.
I am wearing, well, they represent my values in that I have like 5 outfits in rotation, and this is one of them.
The earrings that I have on, they're from a small Black-owned business.
Mending is another really important part of sustainable fashion.
I am wearing all secondhand.
There is a way to really feel beautiful, to enjoy fashion, and at the same time say the current way that things are being produced just doesn't match my values. The fashion industry is really unregulated. And so a lot of what has been so far when it comes to sustainability is business-led conversations, which is why we are greenwashing and tinkering on the edges. It's essentially just a marketing ploy. And so what we need is for governments to really get businesses to take responsibility for their waste streams, for their garment workers, and to divest from fossil fuel.
They score brands, and you can see which brands are doing what and what they're not doing, how they're treating their workers, how much clothing they're making, if they have recycling programs, things like that.
Most garment workers are women. Ones who are most first impacted by climate change are also women. It's really about bringing power to women and women's voices.
With this focus and with this creative energy and with this people power, we can make change, and we see it. We see policy change. We see a worker make a demand on their boss at the factory floor and get their wages back. We see it happening, here in this country and around the world, and we have to focus on that.
We have made jobs safer. We have made sure the young people who are coming into their change-making power know how to advocate for change, and we have passed groundbreaking legislation. If you care about women, you care about the planet, you care about justice, then our movement is for you.
Remake is
Remake is
Remake is
Remake is change. Remake is education, advocacy.
Remake is
a common cause.
Remake is hope.
Remake is a community of like-minded individuals that motivate and inspire each other.
Remake is a way to not just learn about the issues, but take action.
Fashion brand accountability, empowering activism.
Remake is collaboration.
Remake is turning awareness into action.
Finding joy, creativity. Remake is family, I will say.
Remake allows so many people to see what the future could be like and how that differs from where we are now. Remake is the
As I look to the future, Remake is where people will come in and around the fashion industry to be educated, to be inspired, to know how to take action so that we continually campaign, we continually legislate to ensure that fashion does not forget people and the planet.
Let's remake the way we talk about fashion together.
Let's remake how we think about fashion and climate together.
Let's remake the status quo.
Let's remake the world together.
Let's remake our connection between citizens, youth change makers, models, makers, garment workers.
Let's remake the culture of fashion, and let's turn it into and return it to a culture of care.